Then I will call on Katie Voigt to present the consent calendar.
Good morning, Bishop.
Good morning.
Good morning, annual conference. My name is Katie Voigt. I am clergy from the DeKalb District serving at Erie, and I am honored to be here as your chair of daily proceedings. In our time together this morning, we are going to start with the consent calendar that was available online as of 11:30 a.m. on May 1st. A consent calendar helps us to proceed through our work more quickly and efficiently because one vote will be for all the items on the consent calendar. According to the standing rules you see printed on the preliminary consent calendar that hopefully you have all already downloaded, your consent calendar committee met and put together the consent calendar that you found online. There are two categories to the consent calendar, one for approval and one for non-approval. When we take our vote in just a few moments, your vote is in essence agreement with the consent calendar, either for approval or non-approval. We will take one vote for both consent calendars together, so an in favor vote will approve all the legislation on the consent calendar for approval and will not approve all the legislation on the consent calendar for non-approval. An opposed vote would mean that you disagree with the recommendation of the consent calendars. We want to continue to stay clear about why the committee made the decisions that we did. So again, this year you found reasons that items were placed onto the different categories of the consent calendar. We hope this was helpful and works toward the goal of helping us all understand the work we do. Since publishing the consent calendar, I've heard from one author asking to pull the document from consideration. So, document 700.11, affirming our theological task, has been removed from our consideration and thus also from the consent calendar.
All right, the consent calendar is properly before you. I think Katie did a good job of trying to explain that we're going to have one vote, which will then approve and disapprove of those on the consent calendar. So, any questions? Yes, over here. All right, so the question was, is it possible to remove other items from the consent calendar, Katie?
The form to remove something from the consent calendar was available online at the same time that the consent calendar was made available and was due yesterday at 3 p.m. I received paperwork to remove nothing from the consent calendar.
So according to our rules, this is what our consent calendar is, yes? Okay, it's my understanding that they were available, maybe not exactly where you saw them. At this point, this is our consent calendar. All right, so it's properly before us. Those who, yes? You know, if we need a mic. Yeah, it's a bit of a accessibility issue here. So the mic is coming to you. Thank you.
If we didn't see it online, that leaves us completely wiped out of the possibility of doing this, of removing another item. I would ask us if we could use the 25 vote things as a hand vote for removing items.
Yeah, okay. But first you have to vote to suspend the rules.
I would move to suspend the rules. to
Okay.
do that.
Is there a second to suspend the rules? All right. So let's do the suspension of the rules, which then would allow for us to take a hand count to see if 25 of you want to remove a specific piece of legislation from the consent calendar. Those who would, and this takes a 2/3 vote, those who would suspend the rules, please raise your hands. Thank you. Those who would not? And I'm sorry, but it wasn't 2/3. So the consent calendar is properly before us. All those who would accept the consent calendar, please say yes. Those who would not, please say no.
No.
And we registered that, and it is approved.
Bishop, within that consent calendar were 4 documents that closed churches. So can we turn to one of our district superintendents to pray for Elmwood Park United Methodist Church, New Hope United Methodist Church of Chicago, Pilgrimage Protestant Church, and Trinity United Methodist Church of Lindenhurst.
Thank you. Whoops. They'll come, if you need a microphone, they'll come and bring you one to this table over here. That was just scary. Yes, Reverend Darnether Murph-Heath will pray. And she's going to microphone 2.
Let us be in an attitude of prayer. For the churches that were mentioned, for the districts of those churches, for the pastors of those churches, for the congregations that have served so mightily and faithfully in this Northern Illinois Conference. Oh God, we ask for your blessings upon each and every one of them. For the faithful ministries that have endured down through the years, we ask that you would continue to bless them and remember them. For the pastors that have served those churches down through the years, we ask that you would continue to remember them and bless them. For the hearts that are sad because of the closing of churches, we ask that you would mend those hearts. And we ask that those people would move from one church to another to continue to faithfully serve your holy name. We give you praise for the life and legacy of pastors, churches, and members. And we ask that you would hold them in the palm of your hand. Allow your love to sink down deeply into the hearts, that they will not look at this as failure, but that they would see your glory even in the midst of this. We give you praise, oh God, for calling these churches into being. And we ask that their legacy lives on in our minds, our hearts, and our spirits. And you continue to hold them in the vault of heaven. We give you praise. We ask these things in the mighty, matchless, and merciful name of Jesus the Christ. And let every heart present say, amen.
Amen.
Thank you. And we do remember these churches and their witness throughout the years. Yes. Microphone 4.
I read through those petitions, and on a couple of
Your
them,
name, please.
Doug Asbury, retired clergy.
Thank you.
On a couple of them, it indicated where the membership was transferred to, but on several of them, it had no indication that the membership was transferred to another church. And I'm just curious whether they were transferred or what the situation was with those where it wasn't mentioned.
Yes. Microphone. I can't see it. It must be 2. I'll get used to them.
Brittany Isaac, superintendent for Chicago Northwestern, where 2 of the churches are out of my district. And Doug, that's a great question. Most of the folks at least in my district, they aren't all going to one church. They're deciding, some are going to St. John, some are going to Park Ridge First. And so we didn't want to write the legislation to limit that.
All right, thank you. All right, Katie, I think we're ready for the historical reports.
The historical reports were available online as of May 1st as well. A separate download from the legislation, but also available in that same location. I move approval of the historical reports.
All right, they're properly before us. All those who will approve the historical reports and maybe even read them, please say yes. Those who would not approve them and probably won't read them, please say no. Yep, all right. And they are approved.
Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you. The BBC report would come forward. This is not the British Broadcasting Company, as you probably thought, but our beloved community report. So if you would come forward to give your initial reporting.
Anna, I'm Catherine Paisley, but let me start out saying good morning, annual conference. We're pleased to be with you to share some things about what is happening in our conference. We are a part of the Committee on Religion and Race, which for those of you who may be new to the annual conference session, is the committee that is working on justice and a celebration of diversity in the conference. We feel that diversity is an asset. And as we work for justice, we realize the reality that we do not exist on a level playing field. We need to use our positions of privilege on behalf of others so that we can raise each other up, much in the pattern of Jesus. We are the body of Christ, and as one body, we need to nurture the parts of the body that have been injured in order to heal so that we can be whole and effective and show the world what the body of Christ looks like when it's really whole and beloved. We have a task to do. God has called us to be about this task, and we are thankful for all of you and your work with us on this.
Hello, I'm Nadia Kanhai, co-chair of Religion and Race, your conference, Religion and Race. And we are partnering with a campaign from GCOR, the General Commission, inviting you to foster just love in order to make this, to build this beloved community and make central God's love, justice, equity, and inclusion in our denomination's lawmaking processes for the 2020 general and jurisdictional conferences. Part of what this campaign includes is electing and supporting full participation of delegates who are under 30, people of color, women, members of the LGBTQIA community, and delegates who have otherwise previously been marginalized because of economic or social location. We are inviting boldness from church leaders, that's all of us here, with regard to calling out and countering hate speech, supremacy rhetoric, might makes right theology, and us versus and us and them pronouns during our annual conference session. And we call on this body to pray with our feet and our hands, working, learning, challenging, and ministering, marching and witnessing in the pursuit of God's love, justice, peace, and reconciliation as we build this beloved community. We will have more information at our Commission on Religion and Race table next door, including Just Love buttons that call out racism, sexism, homophobia, and ableism, and instead call us to just love as we consider the legislation and voting during this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And all right, this is, now we're going to have the training on the voting machine. Robert Motorhack, are you doing it? Come on down. All right, make sure, are you doing it? Who's doing it? Oh, that was the last one? I thought there was... Oh, guess what? There's a computer malfunction back there. All right. I am going to make an executive decision here. Oh, whoops. Do you really think, okay, if we're back, we'll proceed. How do we do a test vote? Oh, they're busy taking care of the dead machines. Usually once we work these things out at the beginning, then it goes a whole lot easier. A question over here at 2. 2.
Thank you, Bishop. Jim Bell, clergy serving at Belvedere First. In the dead space, I'd like to move that we table the voting for delegates until we have acted on legislation 700.01 and .06. If I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Is there a second?
Bishop, the 2 items in question discuss the Northern Illinois Conference essentially leaving the United Methodist Church and withholding a majority of apportionment payments to the United Methodist Church. It seems to me that the resolution of those questions might affect who we would choose to serve as our delegates to jurisdictional and general conferences. Moreover, all the legislation properly before us, well and honorably submitted, it would seem that we might consistently say that we have received the results of special session, we've received the results of jurisdictional conference, we disagree with those things, we choose to leave the denomination, we choose not to pay apportionment support, and we choose not to send a delegation to jurisdictional or general conference. Or it might be that we would choose to select delegates based on those responses.
All right. Anybody else wish to speak to this? All right, then are you ready to vote? You got it. There were 2 resolutions. I don't have those numbers. 700.01 and 06. Is that correct? All right. You ready to vote? All those in favor, please say yes. Those who would not, say no. No. Oh, well, let's use our arms. All those in favor of delaying our voting until after we've dealt with these 2 pieces of legislation, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those who would not, please raise your hand. All right, and it does not prevail. All right. Okay. We are going to move on for a minute while some of these things get worked out. I'm going to go on with the Episcopal address, and if those who are assisting me would please come to the stage, I would appreciate it. And then hopefully by the time we finish with that, we'll be able to go on to take our first vote. Okay? Yes? Yes? All right, I'm closing the clergy ballot. All right, very good. Now, we will do some legislation. Yeah. All right, so we're going to begin. Katie will lead us.
I invite you to turn your attention to document number 700.16, 700.16. It's on page 29 of the legislative download. As a reminder for all of our legislative work, as you are working to find your page, if you have an amendment to make, we encourage you to find that amendment form at the usher's table and have that written out before you come to the microphone, because the runners will take the top 2 copies from you, and you will be reading from that bottom copy as you make your motion at the microphone.
All right.
Bishop, on behalf of the author of which is the annual conference shepherding team, I move acceptance of this document.
All right. 700.16 is properly before you.
Approval, rather.
Any questions? Anything you want to do with it? Are you ready to vote? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All right. Now you're scaring me. All right, okay. All right, and that's approved. Okay, moving on.
Moving on, I would like to turn your attention to document 700.01. This document begins on page 9 of the legislative download. Most of the actual text of the document appears on page 10. However, just the titling is on page 9.
Okay. So 700.01 is properly before you. Yes. Is that microphone 6, right?
Can I move it before we?
Oh,
I
I'm
need
sorry.
to move it first.
You didn't move
sorry.
it?
Bishop, on behalf of the authors of this document, I move approval of this document.
Thank you very much. Microphone 6.
Bishop, I'd like to submit a friendly amendment.
I do amendments, no friendly ones. They
Brilliant.
always come back to bite you.
Okay. S.E. Brick, Evanston First United Methodist Church, laity. Insert on line 20, at least 3, quote, at least 3 people of color, laity or clergy, preceding at least 3 LGBTQ. So the sentence would actually read, the task force shall include at least 3 people of color, laity or clergy, at least 3 LGBTQ laity or clergy, and then continue as written.
Oh, so the insertion is before 3 LGBTQ laity.
No, it's for 3 people of color. Laity.
But
before.
But you're inserting it right before then.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just had the in place. So 3 people of color, at least 3 people of color, then it continues on 3 LGBTQ.
Yes.
Okay. All right, is there a second to the amendment? It's seconded. Do you want to speak to it?
I had spoke with the author about this, increasing the, centering the voices of people in color and LGBTQ people. We don't necessarily need them to be separate groups, but did think that representation was important in such a diverse area.
Okay. Somebody want to speak against? All right. Any other speakers? Ready to vote? All those in favor, at least 3 people of color, laity or clergy, inserted right before at least 3 LGBTQ. All right? All those in favor say yes. Yes. Those opposed say no. And it prevails. It becomes a part of the main motion, which is the whole document before us. All right. Any other action on this? Ready to vote? All those who would approve 700.01 as you have amended it, please say yes. Yes. Those opposed say no. All right, but it does prevail. Thank you.
Well, we seem to be moving.
Yeah, well, night's early.
It's just the first inning.
It's good.
Why can't I find in my tabs here? Oh, there it is. So I invite you to turn to document 700.12, 700.12. It can be found on page 26 of the legislative download.
All right. $700.12.
Bishop, on behalf of the authors of this document, I move approval of document 700.12, do no harm, limiting complaints and trials.
All right. It's properly before you. Any action? Ready to vote? All those in favor say yes. Yes. Those opposed say no. Thank you, and yet it prevails. All right.
Okay. Next in order, I invite you to turn to document 700.06. Document 700.06 on page 17 of the legislative download. Suspend payments to General Administration Fund. Bishop, on behalf of the authors of this document, I move approval of this piece of legislation.
All right, 700.06, properly before you. Any action? Yes. Microphone 5.
Joe Johnson, clergy, First Elmhurst. I just have a point of information question. So if this legislation passes and our local churches decide to send our full apportionment payment to the conference, then what happens with this general administration fund?
Good question. Would you go to a microphone 3, please, for the answer?
Lonnie Chafin, Conference Treasurer. So currently, because this petition was being proposed from CFA, when we changed the apportionments to local churches, that explained part of it being for the conference and then enumerated the amounts for each of the general funds, we did not assign an apportionment to this particular fund because this petition was pending. If this petition does not succeed, we would then add that fund to each apportionment statement, and that would be how we proceed. If this does pass, then we would continue to not apportion this fund to every local church among the general church funds, and so you would have 100% payment. If you pay your conference fund apportionment 100%, you're a 100% conference church. If you pay the conference fund and you do all the Rainbow Covenant lines, you would be a Rainbow Covenant church. And if you do 100% conference and 100% of the general church funds of the ones we enumerated on your statement, you would get the GCFA certificate of being 100% GCFA church.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh. All right. Over here? And it must be microphone 1. Who's going to microphone 1? Okay.
Michelle Burwise-Laycock, Extension Ministries, CPE Supervisor, Aurora Healthcare, Milwaukee. I wondered, once the task force has reported back and changes are made, then do we pay the money? It doesn't say how long we hold the money for.
Lonnie? Yeah, I'm not sure I heard it all.
Does it? So at the line 44, as a result, a task force is now investigating voter credentials and allegations of improper voting. So if something gets changed, then do we pay our
Got it.
money?
All right, Lonnie?
Lonnie Chafin, Conference Treasurer. I think that there would be eventually a change, and there would be a time in which we come back to the General Administration Fund. So this is only this season. If this passes, it would be for a season, and then we would come back to the annual conference from CFA with a proposal to restore the General Administration Fund at some point, God willing.
Is there a follow-up here?
Is there a time set for the task force to report?
That task force is not our task force. That's a task force of the General Commission on the General Conference. So I can't answer that question specifically.
Okay. Bishop, do you know?
It's hard to say, and then it's hard to know what this task force is going to report. We have some check points along the way. Fair enough question, I think, because in the fall we have a special annual conference session around our own budget, and by that time I would hope we'd have some clarity about what they have identified and what, if anything, they're going to do to address the problem. I would, so that's at least one checkpoint.
Okay.
All right? There were other people at microphone 3, but you kind of disappeared. Did you get your question answered? Is that the deal? All right, glad to know. Microphone, what is that, 2?
So,
Name?
I think this is Dennis Langdon, Morgan Park and Trinity United Methodist Churches, Chicago. I think this is a related topic. So is this binding, and what is the mechanism for undoing it if General Conference behaves differently?
So binding to whom?
Is it binding upon the conference not to send funds for the payment of General Conference, the event, the $117,000 that's referred to?
Okay, Lonnie?
Lonnie Chafin, Conference Treasurer. Bishop, Dennis, I think it's binding on the conference until the conference decides something else. So we could come back in November with a different view. We could come back next June with a different view. I think it would be binding until we make a different choice.
All right, microphone 6.
Thank you, Bishop. John McCoy, Hinsdale United Methodist Church. a couple of questions that I will try to connect so that it's not a series of questions. I'm not sure that everyone knows exactly what is supported by the General Administration Fund, and it might be helpful to detail what exactly is supported by those funds, so what will be the result. Also, while there's a rationale given, I'm not sure what is the intended result or intended impact of this legislation. So if there could be a little more explanation, perhaps, of what exactly is hoped will be achieved by withholding these funds. There was a question earlier that I'm not sure if it was answered, that once the funds are held, or once the funds are not being sent, how will they be held or invested or maintained in the interim until there is a change in policy?
Lonnie, or somebody.
Beard. Kelly Beard, clergy, Holy Covenant, United Methodist Church. So I can provide you the context for this legislation that came out of CCFA. The context was, CCFA was anticipating that the outcomes of General Conference would be uncertain, and so even beforehand, we had decided as a CCFA to sort of wait and see what would happen. And so particularly in response to what is funding the General Conference, it is this General Administration Fund. So Reverend McCoy, just that it's the General Administration Fund funds General Conference. Lonnie might be able to provide you with a more detailed, if there's anything else that it funds. My understanding is that it's only General Conference. The second thing is that where the money would go would just be held in escrow just in the Northern Illinois Conference. There is a question about could that money be used for something? I think that's a legitimate question. I think we just wanted to start with just having it being held for the sake of our conference, figuring out what we want to do in response to the new environment that we have under the traditional plan. I think that was everything, but let me know if it wasn't.
So the General Administration Fund also covers the work of the Judicial Council, which would be very important to be funded to continue to address many of the issues that are before the denomination. Right. And if there are other things that are supported by the General Administration Fund, I think it might be important to know what those things are, because it's not just the General Conference, but there are other ministries that will be impacted by withholding funds or withholding these specific funds.
Lonnie Chafin, Conference Treasurer. So just to kind of clarify a piece here, we aren't collecting these funds from local churches, so we're not holding them and we're not investing them. We're not asking for them as we've set up the apportionment system currently. If this petition fails, we would then ask, and that would be added to your apportionment statement. As I understand it, the General Administration Fund pays for General Conference, the cost of Judicial Council, Archives and History, and GCFA in part. So GCFA kind of is in every fund.
All right. I'll go to microphone 3, then is that 2? 2, and then 6. How about that? Is that good? And 1. Okay. 3, 2, 6, and 1. All right, 3.
Point of information, Bishop. My name is Will Ed Green. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I serve at Boundary United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C. I'm just curious to know whether or not there are any repercussions. So are there any mechanisms by which the General Church can withhold grants, scholarship monies, or other monies provided to churches in the Northern Illinois Annual Conference? Or is this just something that will be kind of a thorn in the side of the General Church?
Can you state that.
Lonnie Chafin, Conference Treasurer. No.
All right, microphone 2.
Myron McCoy, First United Methodist Church, Chicago. I would move to table this.
All right, there's a motion to table. That means short term, not long term. You're not sending it away. Is that your intent? Or is there a second to table? Second. All right. It's not debatable, it's not amendable. It's just a majority, but this means it will come back to us. And I would, the reason for tabling would be helpful to the chair in order to know how to bring it back. It's not a debate, just an assistance to the chair. Yeah, I mean, if we bring it back, it needs to be tomorrow.
Number one, we've talked a lot about doing no harm. Number two, we are electing General Conference delegates. And do we want others to pay for them?
So Myron, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you really want to postpone, which means you send the legislation away.
That's fine. Send it away.
No.
Send it away.
Table means I need to find a place and a reason to bring it back tomorrow. Postpone means we never vote on it.
Let's postpone it.
You want to postpone it. Yes. The third option is to vote it up or down. You're going with postpone. Okay, so postpone. Is there a second to that? Second. There is debate, possible. Well, you know, I gave him a little latitude, but your point's well taken. Myron morphed into postpone. Hopefully not at my encouragement. I just wanted clarity. Are you seeking to speak to postponing? At microphone 2.
I'm sorry, Bishop Lois Nemeth from Olympia Fields United Methodist Church, and the reason why I did second on postponement because this entire piece of legislation was very cloudy at first until I had our pastor at the table explain a little bit more. The language inside here speaks quite a bit about fraudulent voting activity, and that portion made it very cloudy on the reasoning for holding back the funds from the conference. And understanding, if I have this correct, it's because of the multiple languages that the Book of Discipline or the lack of in the other countries is not there to make sure that whatever activities, fraudulent or no, are conducted properly in the General Conference.
Okay, so this is that was a speech to postpone.
Yes.
All right. Microphone 5, and then I'll come to 3.
As somebody who was at General Conference and
Are you speaking to postpone or against postponing?
Postponement.
Against postponing. Yeah. Okay.
As somebody who was at General Conference and watched the celebrations on the behalf of some folks who were glad that the traditional plan passed, the offensiveness of that, the repeated over the number of years of General Conference where we have seen and heard about voting irregularities and irregularities in the way that delegations are sent from Central Conference countries, this is not new, and it is time for General Conference to do something about it. And so a statement by withholding the funds to General Conference is appropriate. So I think we should act on this, not postpone it.
Okay, a speech against postponing. Who did I say? Microphone 3.
Sorry.
Are you speaking to postponing? Well, then we're on postponing. Okay, microphone 3.
Kelly Beard, I use the pronoun she, her, and Holy Covenant clergy. So I rise to speak in opposition to postponement. This legislation was drafted particularly in response to the results of the special session of General Conference. And so when I was reading through this legislation and helping CCFA put it together, I was shocked to learn some of these things myself, which some of you might be feeling too, like you're reading this like, oh my gosh, this system is so broken. That's exactly the point, is that there's a number of ways in which our General Conference is completely dysfunctional. So that's number one. Number two is that by withholding our general administration fund from the General Conference, it signals to the General Conference that we dissent from the traditional plan. I'm speaking for that as my personal reason why I am supporting this petition and opposing the postponement because I'm not representing CCFA, because it doesn't matter which side you fall on, what side you fall on, General Conference is still dysfunctional. But for me, this is a stand against the traditional plan. Many of you have asked, what can we do? This is one thing that we can do. Thank you.
All right. Microphone 6, are you speaking on postponement?
I am, Bishop. Yes. John McCoy, Hensel UMC clergy. I want to speak in favor of postponing this motion because of the punitive nature that seems to undergird it. I think many people have been in congregations where there has been a very careful effort to resist people being very selective about how the funds of the church are used. I think historically within the church, within the Methodist Church in particular, there have been things that people have not wanted to support, and so they've exercised that power by trying to be very punitive. And so many of the important efforts of the Methodist Church that have been able to fund colleges or universities or other very important efforts have not always received universal support because of those who've tried to be very selective in terms of their support. While there might not be universal embrace of the plan that was voted upon, to send this kind of message to congregations of being very selective about how they support different things that are important to the general body might not be the best signal that we want to send at this time.
Okay, I can take one more speech against postponement. Are you against postponement? All right, microphone 4.
Oh, hello, okay. Brian Gilbert, clergy at Princeton First right now. I am speaking against postponement. I am a firm believer that budgets are moral documents and speak to what our core beliefs are. The United Methodist Church on their webpage describes the general fund as the oil that keeps the machinery running. And there are times the machine needs to be shut down and retuned. And I think after General Conference 2019, it's time to shut things down a little bit so that what our apportionments, which is an apportionment for others, is not transformed into apportionment to persecute others. And so I think it's important for us to act in the ways we can, and this is a way that we can act and be heard as a conference.
All right, thank you. I have 3 speeches for postponement and 3 speeches against postponement. So according to our standing rules, we now are going to vote on whether you wish to postpone or not. So you understand that if we postpone, that means this legislation will not come back to us tonight or tomorrow. And it disappears without voting on it because you're postponing it. You're sending it away. Do you understand? All right. All those who would vote in favor of postponement, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those who would not postpone. All right. It is not postponed. All right, the whole document's before us, but I have friends over at microphone 1. I remembered you.
Elaine Moy, Lady First Evanston, she, her, hers. I have a comment on a question that came before about General Conference. When will you know the answer? The General Commission on the General Conference meets the first week of August, and I think they would have a lot of the answers that this conference is looking for by that time, if you want a certain date. My original intent to come to the microphone is if we withhold the money for General Administration Fund, can this conference, when it sends the money to GCFA, be very clear about withholding the money for the General Administration Fund? Because when GCFA receives the money, if it's in a lump sum and not by fund, they will just divide the money into 7 funds.
Ah, can somebody speak to that?
A friendly suggestion.
I think maybe something can be said to it. Is that what you're going to do, Kelly?
Yes. So when our apportionments are sent to the general church, we enumerate which ones we want them to go to. So all of the other funds. So what the legislation specifically states is that the conference would direct the conference treasurer to not pay that fund. So that's what would be communicated to GCFA. We would pay our general church apportionments to the other places that we pay to.
Okay. Just to make sure it's clear, because I know they've been just dividing by 7.
Right. Thank you. All right, this document is before you.
Bishop, a motion?
You have an amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Michelle Burwise Laycock, Extension Ministry, line 10, after the sentence to add a new sentence. This will be reviewed at the November 2019 Northern Illinois Conference Special Session to determine whether adequate changes have occurred in order to release the funds.
Is there a second? All right. Do we wish to speak to it?
Well, what was concerning me on this document is that there's not a date as to how long do we keep the funds and when do we release them.
Okay, they're not collecting funds, but how long this would be enacted?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Microphone 5, are you speaking to this amendment?
Yes. Chris Winkler, clergy, Barrington. We are not collecting the funds, so we can't release them. So that we either have to change the amendment or the amendment's improper, as I understand it.
Well, I don't think so. I don't have it yet, but my notes say this will be reviewed at the special session at November 16th. It's a little bit shorthand.
I think it went on to say, and decide whether or not to release the funds. It would be at that point to decide whether or not to begin collecting the funds, if I understand it.
Was that a part of your
Well,
amendment?
how would we say that it's okay to send the money? Will be collected then. Then we collect them. Help me out.
So, Lonnie, do you want to respond to that? Mm-hmm. Or somebody? Anybody? Are you leaving?
So Lonnie suggested to say, this will be reviewed at the November 2019 Northern Illinois Conference Special Session. Lonnie, where'd you go?
You have to keep your eye on him.
Whether to continue into 2020.
Okay. Whether to continue into 2020. All right, I'm going to have to put a pin in this in a minute, but let me take 4. Actually 3 has been at the microphone for a long time. Let's hear from 3. And then I'll hear from 4, and then we're going to have to put a pin in it unless you're ready to vote.
Mary English, a laity, Christ United Methodist Church in Rockford. And I'm speaking against the resolution.
All right, I'm just doing the amendment right now.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Okay. Okay, so, you know, are you speaking to the amendment?
I have a question. Can I?
I'm just going to have the amendment.
Okay.
Amendment? Anybody in the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Opposed, the same. That means you get a review back at the November session. All right. Who? So the amendment was that this will be reviewed at the special session and whether to continue it or not. And do you need to revote that? Did you understand that's what you were voting on? Okay. All right. But we need to put a pin in this and come back to it tomorrow. It'll be the first legislation that we deal with. All right? Do you think you're ready to vote on it? Oh, my mistake. 3, do you want to speak then?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
And then I have to let 4 speak. And that's it. And then we either vote or we don't. Okay, 3.
Okay. Mary English, and so on. And I'd like to speak against it, and in the interests of fairness, because we are not, the churches are not being billed for this particular money. However, churches, there might be some churches who would like to support this, and so I think we should enable them to do that, and they can send the money, and the conference can forward their money. And that's it.
Okay. Microphone 4.
Rich Wagner, Olympia Fields, Southern District. I have a question, and then can I also speak to it after the question?
You're going to speak to your question? Let's hear your question.
First of all, Lonnie, we love you very much. The question is, are other annual conferences proposing this same sort of thing?
Lonnie? Somebody?
Lonnie Chapin, Conference Treasurer. I have been in conversations with other conferences, but I can't, with other conference treasurers, but I can't say that I know that any of them are proposing this. So
I would like to speak against this.
Against the motion?
Yes.
Okay, I'll let you.
I understand the targeted punitive nature and trying to change things this way, but there is no real evidence that I've seen or heard that it will be received in the way in which it is intended.
Okay, speech against. Microphone 3.
Speech 4.
All right.
Mary Lou Eubanks, clergy, Sycamore United Methodist. Pronouns she and her. Before I became a member of the clergy in pastoral care, I made my living as a French interpreter. I have interpreted at the past 5 general conferences. It was an honor and a privilege back in 2016 to be the voice for Bishop Strife when he presided for the very first time at a session of the General Conference in French instead of in English. That was the highlight of my interpreting career. The low point was in Pittsburgh in 2004. I sat in 3 chairs with an American father and an African father. The American father was trying to help the African father understand his pain because his son was a homosexual. He had been raised in the Methodist Church and was no longer attending church and no longer believed in God because of the way the United Methodist Church was treating him. And his father was in pain, and he wanted this African man to understand that. And the African man listened, and he listened with patience, and then he reached out and he touched the American man's hand, and he said, "I too am a father. I feel your pain. I will pray for your son." And I thought, yes, there is hope. Until he added, "I will pray for your son to repent of his sin." But that African gentleman is a good man. He is a man who loves the Lord. And he also loves the United Methodist Church for bringing the good news to his grandfather and to his village. And he doesn't understand our culture. For him, homosexuality, if we open that door, we open the door to polygamy that they have worked for so long to get rid of. So I stand up here with very mixed emotions because I love the fact that our African delegates now have a voice that they did not have. But by the same token, I have witnessed the corruption. I interpreted for the young man who is the son of a bishop who is identified in the New York Times article. I have seen the fear in delegates' eyes when they want to vote against their bishop's wishes. It is sad that money talks. But money talks. I urge you to vote in favor of this.
All right. You know, I don't know that we can go a whole lot after 9 o'clock. So I feel like you finally are getting into what needs to be said about this piece of legislation. And I feel like in order to do justice to it, I need to put a pin in it so that we come back to it tomorrow. And if you would go to 6 and you would go to 4 and you would go to 3 and you would go to, is that 2? And I can't even tell if there's anybody over at 1. And now they're going there. Oh, get down. Seamus, is that you?
Yes. Of course it is.
All right, so I feel like that's the justice we need to do to it. And we're not ready to vote. But we also need to come to the end of the day. Okay? Are we all right? All right. Yes, what? Microphone 1.
Bishop, I know that we are trying to come to the end of the day, so I'd like to ask for this to be included tomorrow, but I would like to make a motion from the floor.
On this?
Not on this.
On something else?
Yes.
Okay. Try it.
Okay. So I would like to ask that we shall, and I have the motion here ready to go for you, but we shall, at the Northern Illinois Conference of 2019, take a non-binding straw poll on the following question. If the Northern Illinois Conference of the United Methodist Church were offered the opportunity to choose a direction for its future, should that direction be 1, a conference whose policies allow for clergy to officiate at same-gender weddings, allow for consideration of ordained ministry, people of varying sexual orientations and gender identities, and in which appointments are made with consideration given to the full range of contextual realities, or 2, according to the Book of Discipline as amended in 2019. The rationale being that at this time, clarity is crucial, and for this body to have something to let their congregations know at home where our annual conference is on this, being of the utmost importance. Along with that, we've just voted this task force to be created. This could be helpful in guiding their work if they know where we are on this. And finally, as we go forward, other annual conferences like Michigan are doing this. And knowing where annual conferences are, us doing it encourages others to do that, then we know who we can be working along with as we seek a future.
Is there a second? Okay, let me tell you what I'm going to do. All right? There's a second. I'm going to allow the body to decide if they will receive this legislation, because essentially you have late legislation. Okay?
Yes.
But I'm going to let the body decide if you want to receive this legislation. If they do, then we can print it up or have it available, and we would discuss it tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay? So this is what I'm going to do. Would you be willing to receive this, we'll call it legislation, to talk about tomorrow? If so, would you raise your hand? Thank you. If not, would you raise your hand? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We will receive it tomorrow. You've given it up here. We'll have it so that people have it available to see. We will put it after the other legislation to come up tomorrow.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay? All right. I am going to report on a ballot. You've been at 6. Can I ask you, how can I help you? So that you could sit down, if nothing else.
It's okay. I came to speak against the motion that's on the floor.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to stand at 6 until tomorrow when we come to it.
Okay.
You can go right to 6 when we start talking about 700.06, and then you'll tell us what you want to say. Okay? All right. Thank you. All right. Let me report on ballot 7.
So we find ourselves in the middle of document 700.06. It can be found on page 17 of the legislative download. Page 17, document 700.06.
So let me tell you where we are. We have 1 speech for, we have 2 speeches against. If you were at a mic last night, when we stopped, you may go to that mic. If you still feel that you need to speak, that is. All right, microphone 6.
Gary Green, First Church, LaGrange. My sisters and brothers, you all should know up front that I'm one of the 3 United Methodists on the planet whose mind is not yet made up on the whole LGBTQ issue. I see value in the arguments of both sides and have reached no conclusion yet after pondering this matter for decades. Also, I must begin with an apology. Last night I indicated that I would be speaking against the motion. In fact, it would be more accurate to say that I'm speaking both for and against the motion simultaneously. The purpose of this motion...
I'll be the judge then, okay?
Okay. The purpose of this motion is found in its opening sentence. Quote, the NIC will not pay the General Administration Fund until changes are made to the structure and practices of the General Conference, unquote. This would be a withholding of administrative funds with the intent to force the General Conference to investigate charges of voter fraud and coercion and to correct matters if any of these charges are found to be true. This would make the General Conference, in fact, take actions it should take on its own to preserve the integrity of its very existence. This is a good and proper rationale, and I support the motion on those grounds. However, please note that there is no mention here of changes in theological stances. Yet 3 speakers last evening spoke in favor of the motion on the grounds that its passage would send a message to the General Conference about the LGBTQ inclusion debate. If it is your intention to vote for this motion in order to effect a change in the St. Louis Conference decision of February and in various statements of the Book of Discipline, I speak against the motion because the motion is improperly written to achieve that purpose. It requires no such action. This may encourage some of my sisters and brothers to amend this motion or create a new one that would link the payment of general administration funds to changes in a theological stance. Let me say that this should not be done. While there is plenty of tradition and scripture to support such an action, to put the matter in Wesleyan terms, that tradition, for example, is marked by the Spanish Inquisition and the Albigensian Crusade. Change your beliefs, or we will force you to do so upon threat of significant harm. In the New Testament, Stephen died as an example to all Christians at the time of the consequences of not changing belief, and Good Friday stands as a statement about attempted coercion of thought. To go this route is wrong because it says that our arguments are too weak to persuade, and thus we must extort the change that we want. This is immoral. Indeed, it is grossly immoral. I would urge this conference and future conferences to resist this temptation. To paraphrase Gamaliel's statement quoted in Acts, if this theological change is of God, it will happen. If it is not, it will not. This motion seeks to give God a level playing field in our decision process. To withhold funds for this end, whether good or bad, is to make the field unlevel in a different way, whereby money decides theology. And again, this is immoral. Thank you.
I'm going to take that as a speech against. All right, I can take 2 speeches for. Microphone 2.
I'm Gregory Gross, ordained deacon, serving as the Director of Mission Fulfillment at the Night Ministry in Chicago. I rise to speak in favor of this legislation. Having been a delegate to the 2016 and to the 2019 special session of General Conference, I rise in favor of this legislation because, friends, things are out of order at General Conference. Things cannot proceed as they have been occurring. As the legislation says, there is an investigation that needs to take place to see if delegates were incorrectly seated. And that has real implications for us because the plan regarding disaffiliation passed by 4 votes. 4 votes. If people who were seated incorrectly and voted for it, it passed incorrectly. That has financial implications for our local congregations who are looking to disaffiliate as a result of the passage of the traditional plan, because of the substitution that was made for the legislation regarding disaffiliation has real financial implications for our local congregations and for our conference, depending on how we decide to go forward. So friends, I don't usually rise to say, withhold funds from the United Methodist Church that raised me in small town Ohio in a rural church that formed me at Ohio Northern University, a United Methodist institution, a Garrett Evangelical, a United Methodist institution. But friends, things aren't normal. These aren't normal times that we are living in. We must register our complaint and push the General Conference to investigate what took place. And I speak as someone with real experience, because at 2016, a delegate came up to me and said, I know this is important to you, the inclusion of LGBTQ persons. How important is it? How important is it? Why don't you go back and think about how important that is, and you come back to me tomorrow morning and let me know how important that is. Friends, a delegate to General Conference wanted me to buy his vote.
Please wrap up.
By his vote. That is not who we are, friends. That has financial implications. I said, I will not buy your vote. That is not who I am. I will not do this. But friends, we must speak as an annual conference. Other conferences are looking to us.
Please wrap up.
I am wrapping up.
Okay.
And so I am urging you to vote in favor of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. I can take one speech for. Is your speech for? At 1? Is your speech for? Oh, I'm sorry, that's 6. Is your speech for at 6?
Yes.
Okay, go.
I'm Tom Butler, lay, First Evanston. I speak in support of this legislation. It is a way to use our financial power to resist a deeply flawed and evil system of governing.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Now we have 3 speeches for, 3 speeches against. The legislation is properly before you. Microphone 3.
Kelly Beard, clergy, pronouns she, her, hers. I just wanted to let you know that on CCFA, we have a range of views, and this legislation is coming to you on behalf of CCFA. And this legislation was intentionally created to address the systemic problems of General Conference. There's some individuals, including myself, who do see this as a message being sent to the General Conference. But I want you to know that if you aren't sure what to think about LGBTQIA people, or you're not really sure, what your church might do about this, this legislation was meant to include you too. It's focused on the practices of General Conference. So I just wanted to share that point of information. Thank you.
All right. I'll take that as a final speech from the maker. Now it's properly before you. All who would vote yes in favor of this legislation, please raise your hand. All right. Thank you. Those who would vote no, please raise your hand. Thank you, and it does prevail.
I invite you to turn to document 700.15. Document 700.15, Restructure the UMC. It can be found on page 28 of the legislative download.
What happened to my little post-it note? All right.
Bishop, on behalf of the authors, I move approval of this document.
All right. 700.15 is properly before you. Alrighty then. Are you ready to vote? Evidently. All those in favor, please say yes. Those who are opposed, please say no. There were some dissenting votes, but it does pass. All right then.
Our next piece of legislation came to us on the floor yesterday. It has been numbered 700.17, and we have it for you on the screens.
All right, 717. 700.17. Oh, that was the email. 1 second. So would you read that for us?
We shall, at the Northern Illinois Conference of 2019, take a non-binding straw poll on the following question. If the Northern Illinois Conference of the United Methodist Church were offered the opportunity to choose a direction for its future, should that direction be, number 1, a conference whose policies allow for clergy to officiate at same-gender weddings, allow for consideration of ordained ministry people of varying sexual orientations and gender identities, and in which appointments are made with consideration given to the full range of contextual realities, or number 2, according to the Book of Discipline as amended in 2019.
All right. Is there a second? Or did we second it before? Okay, we got one now. It's properly before you. Yes, over here, microphone. Is that one?
Bishop Connie Schweitzer from South Elgin Community United Methodist. Not having this piece of legislation in writing before us makes it very difficult to evaluate and vote on this. Yesterday, we thought we were going to be getting this in writing. I realize that it's on the screen, but we don't have anything to take back with us either. Will we have some mechanism for getting a print copy of this sent to us at some point?
Yes, so it's on the website, I'm being told.
Okay, thank you.
Essentially, do you mind if, I do think it's important just to have a little explanation for it without too much argument about it, but simply to explain what each of the options might be, like maybe in 2 minutes. But first, let me ask what microphone 6 wants.
I just wanted to ask a procedural question. Given that the results of the straw poll may be used as an advisory by the various delegates, is it possible for us to show not just the yays and nays on the two, but any abstention votes?
And, you know, I don't do abstentions. Robert's rules is, as you know. He's not big on abstentions. If you don't feel that you can vote because you don't have an opinion, or you feel like there's, usually in some other situation, but if you feel like you have some conflict of interest, you simply don't vote, and it doesn't affect the outcome. So it's always the possibility not to vote, but we don't count those. Thank you. All right. Would you be interested in having the maker of this motion give a 2-minute explanation of what these two options are, or are you ready to vote? You're ready to vote. Okay. I just want to be fair. Explanation. Then if people want an explanation, I'm going to ask Anna to come for, or go to a mic, I mean. George, were you going to a mic?
Bishop George Groves, Community United Methodist Church in Naperville. The question I have is, since this is going to be a straw vote, is it going to be counted?
Yeah, you know.
Because that's...
Yes. What we're going to do is, because you have those fancy-dancy devices.
Not enough?
Except for we're going to do it just like we've done it all. Is it week or just yesterday? The laity are going to vote 1 or 2. They'll be able to put up 1 or 2, and you'll see what 1 or 2 is. And then you'll hand your device over to the clergy, and the clergy will vote, and we'll have the combined number. So, good question. Microphone 3. Rob? Is that 2?
Yeah.
That's 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
See, I've never been able to see the number from here.
Rob Hamilton, clergy, he, him, point of information. Would it be, I'm a visual person, would it be possible to see the first slide again and then
Sure.
the second slide?
That's fair enough. Can you see the first slide? Does it need to be read out loud, I mean? Yes? All right, Katie, would you read it out loud?
We shall, at the Northern Illinois Conference of 2019, take a non-binding straw poll on the following question. If the Northern Illinois Conference of the United Methodist Church were offered the opportunity to choose a direction for its future, should that direction be Number 1, a conference whose policy allows for clergy to officiate at same-gender weddings, allow for consideration of ordained ministry people of varying sexual orientations and gender identities, and in which appointments are made with consideration given to the full range of contextual realities. Or number 2, according to the Book of Discipline as amended in 2019.
Okay. Microphone 1, are we ready for a brief explanation? We're going to count you at 2 minutes.
Thank you, Pastor Anna Voinovich from Downers Grove First. Pronouns in flux. So the rationale behind this piece of legislation is to give us an opportunity to find out where we actually are as an annual conference. We've had listening sessions and opportunities for people to tell us what happened, but we actually haven't had the opportunity to hear or see from each other where we are. Along with that, we just voted to form a task force deciding what we do as a future. This could provide some guidance to the task force for where we are. Finally, it sends a message to our jurisdiction and other annual conferences so they know where we stand, and we can maybe find out where they do if they ask a similar question, so that as we look to be in connection with conferences in the future, whatever this looks like, we can know where each other's at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Microphone 6.
Beth Swanek, First Evanston, laity, she, her. I just want a point of clarification, please. Are we voting on whether we're going to take a straw poll, or are we voting on the straw poll itself?
It's my understanding we're voting on the straw poll.
Thank you.
We're voting 1 or 2. Oh, okay, I see what you mean. Now I understand. Okay, so, yes. Do we want to even take a straw poll? You're right. All right, so do you want to take a straw poll? Microphone 6.
Bishop Robert Beekman, Maple Park, United Methodist Church, Chicago Southern District. I'm very uncomfortable in taking a straw poll because I know that in many of our contexts, in terms of talking about doing no further harm, in many of our contexts, we may not know how our congregations feel. And I think that as we come together in this moment, we are representative, but I don't believe that many have taken the opportunity to talk to their congregations to find out where they are. I would not want to send a message to jurisdictional nor general conference indicating that our annual conference feels one way or another. Even though it says non-binding, I know that when we leave out of here, people are going to say, this is what we agreed to do. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a speech against taking a straw poll. Microphone 5.
Brian Smith, clergy, Chicago Northwest District. Bishop, I call the question.
You have to have at least 2 speeches for and 2 speeches against to call the question. Now, if people are done asking questions or making speeches for or against, then we can proceed to a vote. Microphone 2.
I believe 1 was here first.
Was 1 there first? Okay, 1.
Thank you. Beth Whedon from Kingswood United Methodist Church, and I'm speaking for, but I would also, because I think it's important for the work that's going to be done with the task force to get a pulse of what's happening within our conference. That said, I think it would also be important to know, besides the 2 options that are there, people who are undecided, who just don't know, because I think that might help inform the task force of the work that they might need to do.
Deanna Mead, Christ United Methodist Church in Rockford, clergy. I'm speaking for, but I'm also speaking at a point of information. We are here as members of the annual conference, not delegates. We were voting to send delegates from our annual conference, so we are here to vote our conscience, not what our congregations have sent us forth as their conscience. So you are here to vote your conscience as members of the annual conference.
All right, so that's a speech for. Microphone 6.
Bishop John McCoy, Hinsdale United Methodist Church. Is it possible before we have any more speeches for or against to first hear the rationale? The 2-minute presentation? She did it? I'm sorry. I missed it. My apologies. So I rise to speak against, and my rationale is this appears that we're taking a step towards essentially succeeding from the United Methodist Church, which sends a very interesting or concerning signal to many congregations. There is a great deal of angst not only within our congregation, within our conference, within our congregations, but also within our denomination. And so I'm not sure that the straw poll is intended to do anything more than send that kind of signal, which isn't the best thing for us both locally or globally.
Would you put the text back up just so we can be clear again about what it is you might be voting on? And then the next one after this. All right, microphone 6.
Is it appropriate to offer an amendment to this motion?
What's your amendment?
It would be to add a third choice.
Oh, okay.
The third choice being unable to decide at this time. It avoids the abstention problem.
Yeah, it does. Okay, I'm thinking that then we won't be able to do the, can we do the 1, 2, and 3, or can we only do 2? This is a technical question that I have to the back desk, just so that you have that information. Does somebody second it? Okay. I think it's important to get the answer to that, so you know.
Well, we were voting for 3 conference delegates. We ought to be able to
Yeah,
vote
I don't know. I just want to
for
make
one
sure.
Of 3.
I get your reasoning. I just want to double check. Yes, we can do 3. So the amendment is to add a third, which is unable to decide. There was a second. Microphone 1.
Yes, I'd like to just have the Second Amendment, the language that's used for that amendment, so it's clear to everyone what it actually says.
Yes, so do we have that paper yet, or can you repeat it for us just to be sure that we're clear? So the third option is being proposed, unable to decide is what I wrote down. Okay. Microphone, and that was a speech, unable to decide at this time. Microphone 2.
My name is Brittany Isaac, and I'm the superintendent for the Chicago Northwestern District. I am rising to speak against this amendment. When the traditionalist plan passed in February, the curtain of the temple was torn, and we cannot go back. No longer can we live in a conference of don't ask, don't tell. No longer can we live in a place where we don't talk about hard things. You are either wanting the traditionalist plan and the punitive stances that it holds, or you want to move into a more generous expression of Wesleyan theology. There's just no going back to the don't ask, don't tell that we used to have.
Okay, I have a speech for and against to add unable to decide at this time. Anybody else? Then all those who would approve this amendment to add the third option, unable to decide at this time, please raise your hand. Those who would not, please raise your hand. And it does not prevail. Okay, we have the legislation to determine whether we're going to take a straw ballot. We have 2 speeches for and 2 speeches against. Are you going to microphone 4?
Can I make an amendment?
Yes?
Another amendment?
Yep.
In my experience, straw polls are not written down. They're just questions that get asked in a verbal way. A middle ground might be to toss all of this.
Could you make your amendment first and I'll let you speak to it?
My amendment is to...
And your name?
My name is Rich Wagner, Olympia Fields, United Methodist Church, clergy, Southern District. My amendment is to disregard this written piece with great thanks for the authors, and instead to verbally get a sense of this room right now, just by voting without putting anything to pen and paper.
So is your amendment, is there,
What is a straw poll? Does it require a written ballot with numbers?
so your amendment is to just have a verbal vote?
That's right.
Can we just put it like that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Is there a second? All right. Does anybody wish to speak to this amendment? Well, you sort of spoke to it.
I did.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody wish to speak to this? So the amendment is to just have a verbal vote as opposed to a written vote. All those in favor of a verbal vote, please raise your hand. Thank you. You still need to write it down, Richard. Those who would not go for a verbal vote, please raise your hand. Okay, and it does not prevail. So the legislation is still before us. Microphone 5.
Brian Smith, clergy, Chicago Northwest District. Bishop, I'd like to call the question, please.
All right. Is there a second?
That was clear.
Like right there.
All right. How many of you would like to proceed to vote? This is just to proceed to vote on this legislation. Raise your hand. All right, thank you. Those who want to continue to discuss, please raise your hand. All right. So the legislation is before you, and it is, in essence, to take a straw poll. Those who would take a straw poll with these, show the 2 questions again, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those who would not, please raise your hand. All right, thank you, and it prevails. All right, then I think we can proceed to the straw poll, right? And you heard me say that we will have the laity vote first. So you take the devices. Put the device in your hand.
Or on the table.
On the table. Remember, they got to
Oh, all right. Put the device on the table.
How quickly she forgets.
All right, put your device on the table.
Not taking a selfie.
Yes, microphone 4.
Can we just clarify who can vote on this, because it's different than the voting we've been doing with the machine so far?
Oh, good point. Thank you very much. Everybody can vote on this. And if you run out of machines, you know, you're going to have to, so if there aren't enough machines for the laity to vote, you're going to have to see if you can find them at another table. All right? Okay. Are you, microphone 1, sorry.
Just a point of information. Will the results be broken out in terms of clergy and laity?
I think we'll put them as one.
Okay.
I don't. All right. Are we, do we have are we ready to go with the vote back there? Yes. So, you'll tell me when they're good to go? Yes. Laity, vote 1 or 2? Or, no, we didn't do that. 1 or 2?
What is 1?
1 is listed there. 1 or 2.
Open conference or books of discipline. I think we've got our lives checked.
Just a tire or 2. Someone's coming. Someone needs help over here.
Yeah, I know the story.
Oh.
Thank you. Yeah.
Place it on the table.
That is so good.
Everybody's a critic.
Why not? It's almost 4:30 on Tuesday.
All right, are you done?
It's only 1 or 2.
Don't let me forget to announce the ballot. Sure you pick up majorities.
That's interesting too. Even after we made the motion for pluralities. See, I do that. This is
Are you done?
35th time this summer.
Thank yous. Boom. I have to do boom. All right, you're done. All right, then I'm closing the laity. Oh, okay. Just checking.
Because as I'm watching credentials, they're running around like they were.
Right.
And that's what I'm guessing is from the new folks.
All right. There's still one flag here.
They're both one is
When you press the number, it automatically goes to OK, and that's right. You don't have to hit the number and then.
Okay, so all you have to do is press the number and it automatically registers. No OK is necessary. But if they pressed OK, is it okay? Oh, yes. I don't know. I just say what they tell me to say. All right, are you done? All right, I'm closing the laity vote. Now, laity, hand your device to a clergy person.
Thank you, Jack.
And as soon as they give me the okay, I mean, you don't have to press okay. All right, clergy, vote 1 or 2. All you have to do is press 1 or 2. Yes.
We can get an L vote with this one.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Bishop, this concludes our legislation.
And if Danita Anderson, when you finish voting, if you would come forward, please, for the boom report. All right, clergy, are you done? All right, then the clergy ballot is done.
Then, Bishop, this concludes our legislation.
Yay!